Hello and welcome to the Huddle Breakdown. I have returned even though my entire Celtic supporting loyalty has been greatly tested over the last few weeks. I promise it's not anything to do with the two men joining me today. James and Alan. James, how you doing?
Good. We've been messaging. I hope that you securing that helicopter and just bypassing transportation is going well. So,
yeah, I mean, if it's good enough for sports stars and the like, then why not me? I already used it to go up to my beach house up north, so why not use it to commute to work every day?
just get the permits, or else the council will be after you.
As long as you fly low enough, it's fine. So fine. But Alan, how you doing?
Yeah, I'm all right. Very refreshed this week. One of the upsides to the debacle of a football match that we watched on Sunday was that there were so few packing events, about half the normal match, that it was able to dust off the old match stats in double quick time. Even time to speak to my family and things like that. So all
Wow.
good.
I mean, that just shows you I have no idea what it takes to get the stats that you have, because from a novice's perspective, that looked like an absolute mess of a game to get any stats from. So I'm glad for you at least that it didn't take as long as normal. Speaking of which,
Yeah, it's kind of
yeah.
to summarize it is sort of hoof, header, clearance, duel,
Throw in.
hoof, throw in. That was essentially it. So capturing that in data form, imagine that in little spreadsheet cells. It's quite interesting.
I'm waiting on Opta to start taking data on expected hoofs, just like when someone lines up as if they're about to kick it and then don't or whatever. But who knows? We'll see. James, let's get into it. The Hearts game, I've seen a lot of narrative around it, suggesting that we played the game that they wanted, which to some extent I think is true. I guess my question for you is, did we play the game they wanted because of our own faults and failings, or because they forced us into that? Where's your opinion on that?
I didn't have a good sense for that watching live. I just felt like we were quite easily getting pulled into that game, and there didn't seem to be a whole lot of focus on trying to build out from the back, and didn't seem to me at the time anyway that Hearts were particularly front-footed in pressing us, particularly high. So they seem to be deploying the strategy, which again, fair enough, it's been successful from some teams, to basically let our center backs have the ball and man mark the rest of the pitch. So I have some graphics right away to get into. We don't usually get into these that closely. And before I show my two graphics here, I want to preface this by saying that the titles are tongue-in-cheek. Okay, so this is intentionally to try to wind people up, is how I've titled these. This is to welcome you back, Laura. And in your honor, I'm trying to wind people up. Thank you. So the first one here is this idea of, did Hearts force us into getting sucked into this style of play? I don't really think so on the margin. I think it seemed like our default was hoof it, it seemed like. And basically what I've plotted here, for the people who are listening and not watching, is basically pressures and counter pressures in each of Hearts games this season. And you can see that they were by far the most passive they've been by these two metrics. And again, this wasn't because they had 20% possession, or 80% possession. Possession was like 55-45, something like that. Some of that, this might be impacted a little bit because of the red card, and they had more of the ball. Maybe, I mean, you can make that case. I mean, they weren't really in a dominant possession-based phase then either. But so I just don't think it was that. I think it was more so this issue of just, for whatever reason, we decided to go long. Now, having said that, my second graphic, and this one's not great, so I'm going to expand here and get rid of our beautiful faces for the people that are watching this. This is two metrics. One's progressive passes, which is kind of like a cousin of Alan's pack passes that Y Scout has. And then long pass percentage is basically of the passes that you played in a game, what percentage of them were categorized as being long again, by Y-Scout. And what you can see here is there's a cluster of Hearts games in here. So this is not unusual that we go to Tynecastle, and we all know this, kind of tighter pitch and the physicality, and they historically have been a little bit more of a direct team. So it's not crazy that you would get in, kind of sucked into this game. But I think the specific nature in which we did, it wasn't a chaotic, it wasn't like them flying into tackles and putting that pressure on. And what you'll also see is that the other games that are in this kind of lower rung of, low amounts of progressive passes and playing long are games in Europe, particularly. You've got the PSG game, the recent Midtjylland game, last season's Aston Villa game away, Bologna, some of the worst hidings that we had under Rodgers' first tenure, and at Beersheva the summer in the return leg in Israel, at Karabag in 2015 under Dyla. So, it's this mix of going long, less control of the game, and really not cutting teams open in a structured way, but really devolving into like chaos ball. So we were definitely in that cluster, and we'll certainly talk about how wise or unwise that may have been.
Yeah, we've had Brendan ball, Ange ball, Nancy ball, now get chaos ball. Alan, where do you lie in that particular debate with what you watched on Sunday in terms of the quality of the play from both teams?
Well, I was joking in the intro, but actually, if you look at the first actions, so this is from kickoff, these were the first things that happened. Scales just hoofs the ball up the field. Celtic then lose 2 headers in a row. It goes to a Hearts player. The Hearts player then hoofs it up the pitch. A Hearts player falls over, and a foul's given. And pretty much you could just repeat that cycle for 90 minutes, and that is the game. Just to build on what James said, in my sort of style of James likes diagrams, I like lists on PowerPoint. That's me. Just to put into context how different this game was. So these are the lowest pass completion matches since I started collecting data. The color coding on the chart at the top is based on the competition type. So the red one, for example, is the Champions League qualifier against Beersheva that James referenced. The yellow is SPFL games, and the orange is the Europa League matches. So the majority of these are Europa League games where we've had low percentage pass completion, and the 3 SPFL games, 2 of them are at Tynecastle, one's at Ibrox. But the lowest of the lot was that game there, 65%. By 2%, the lowest pass completion of any game that I've got records for, which is now going back 11 seasons. So that's a pretty reasonable sample of matches. And 3 of those matches with the lowest pass percentage have been under Martin O'Neill in the last few months. So that tells us something, as you say, Laura, about what is O'Neill ball. And at the bottom, I've just put the average pass completion for all matches by all managers. And the lowest was actually Ronnie Dyla's football, going way back, 83, 84%. Again, that tended to be football played at quite a sedentary pace by today's standards, and a bit more direct as well. But it never really drops below, apart from, when Lennon got hold of the team and it dropped down to 85%. But generally it's been about 87, 88% under Rodgers, Postecoglou, for example. And then it's gone down a little bit with the various managers this season. So just to put it into context, that was a very unusual game. And I think from my point of view, in terms of was it deliberate, I think it was, because having watched it back, I think there were a number of occasions where the centre-backs got the ball and they just laced it, and even though they weren't under any particular pressure. So, and if you look at throw-ins is the other big tell, because again, generally Celtic, when they take throw-ins historically, as Thomas Grunemark noted, they're basically short and safe and often backwards. Whereas in this game, if you look at the first half, Kieran Tierney only completed 1 of his 10 throw-ins. So he went long with all 10 and only 1 of them was completed. In the second half, Araujo only completed 1 of 7 throw-ins, so 6 throw-ins went long and were given away. So we were deliberately getting the ball up the pitch. That was a deliberate strategy of play. That's how O'Neill elected to play this game. And yeah, we can discuss that, because I won't profess to understand why that was a good idea. Having said that, we very nearly won the game and probably should have won the game. But what I will say, so my big but on this is that there were 4 occasions during the game where Celtic got the ball down and passed it. And those 4 occasions were in the second or third minute. We won a corner and Scales had a header on goal. The second was the move that led to Negrin being taken down for the free kick goal. The third was when Shanchara hit the bar with a header. And then the fourth was the second goal. There were the 4 occasions that we tried to pass the ball, and all 4 occasions led to a direct shot on goal.
James, I'm going to applaud you on your ability to stifle your laughter at the phrase "big butt." I know that it would go down well and over on your side of the pond.
And I can relate to it.
But I guess we will get into a little bit more of what O'Neill's trying to do, as Alan says, and trying to understand what we think his aim is with this team. But I guess the first thing I wanted to ask you about is, Alan's talked about the throw-ins not being completed a lot of the time. From my observation, we were just failing to do the basics a lot of the time. And the thing that O'Neill was praised for when he first came back in was simplifying everything, getting back to the basics. I'm struggling because I see a bunch of players there who can't do the basics. How can you go back to basics when the players can't do it? Am I being too harsh?
I think going through the autopsy of the Nancy period and what's gone on in the public sphere since then, the way I think about that simplification framing is decision making, meaning that it's not, you don't have to think. We're going to simplify this so that you don't have to think. You don't have to do anything new. You don't have to take any risks if you don't want to. God forbid Callum McGregor play a forward pass to a guy in the middle of the pitch. Even if he's wide open, that's thinking too much. That's too complicated. And so that's how I think about it. It's simplify decision-making to theoretically, I guess, try to eliminate mistakes. I think that's been quite mixed, as we see again in this game, with things like Trusty just basically gifting things. And the other part of this, so we always try to talk about things through the lens of what we can control versus what we can't control. When I say we, i.e. our team that we're, rooting for, have a rooting interest in. And we couldn't control how Hart set up. We couldn't control that Derek McInnes decided to go with a 43-year-old keeper out of nowhere. Just incredibly, not surprisingly, but incredibly nonetheless. He has a keeper that's been one of the best performing keepers in non-top 5 leagues this season in Schlowell by objective measurements. And he just drops him because he needs somebody that knows the fixture. I mean, it's like comedy hour. We couldn't control that he played 4 center backs in a back 4, and that's what he did. So, there's things that we could control. I don't think Hearts played that well particularly. And I mean, they had how many one-on-ones or wide open attempts at goal where their guys either fluffed it, or, to his credit, this is the one area of keeper play where Schmeichel continues to be functional, if not good, is 1v1s. I mean, he's still doing very well with 1v1s, coming off his line, coming for crosses, not so much, but so I think with the parts that we could control in this game, it made no sense to me. I mean, we had Martin O'Neill in the presser make eminent sense. Like I was in our chat area on huddlebreakdown.com. I was like, this is wonderful. He's under promising people call it UPOD. You under promise so you can over deliver for the new striker. And so he explicitly said, this guy's not a hold up striker. And we come out in the first game and the first half is nothing but lobbing it up to this guy high as if he's a hold up striker. It's like, how did this end up being the game plan in this game?
Still with 12 headers, by the way. He barely won one.
Yeah. Which is not being critical of him. He's not good at it. As Martin O'Neill said, that he's not. So then why was that the game plan? Particularly with, our issues in midfield where we're not a great second ball, Harry Carey type of, our midfielder who's supposed to be good at that nominally is Engels, and he mysteriously never is against a decent level opponent and winning second balls in these kind of Harry Carey kind of games. So this is where we devolved to, after 3 or 4 games in his first interim tenure. It's also why I was not optimistic if he stuck around that we were going to magically get through December, because of the underlying performance levels, which, by the way, now after his 8 games domestically, he has the exact same non-penalty XG difference as Brendan Rodgers did in his 9 games. So, the difference in why we've won most of those games or drawn and he hasn't lost any is most of that has nothing to do with the control of a manager. So this is where we're at. We're in like a volatile, chaotic style of play now with players that it doesn't suit. And we might have 2 more injuries now. We'll have to see. So yeah, I actually found the game disheartening because of what it might indicate where, this push and pull between, let's say, the Sean Maloney control, like quasi Brendan Rodgers style of play versus the Martin O'Neill get it forward style of play. And it's, at least for this game, it was very much towards the latter. And I don't think that serves us well in trying to win the league.
Interesting that you mentioned that about the new striker whose name I still cannot pronounce, so I'm not going to try and butcher it until I get it a little bit better. But I was texting my brother during the game and I actually mentioned the fact that I hadn't heard any of Martin O'Neill's comments, but he certainly didn't look like a good hold-up striker. And yet the minute we managed to get him to turn and run onto the ball, he creates something for us. So very much like a kind of, and I don't want to trigger anybody because I know he was a source of much frustration, but very much like a Samaras, who you would imagine because of his height might be a good target guy, but was actually much more about his mobility and his technical ability. So remains to be seen how effective he'll be, but I certainly think domestically he'll do a job for us, especially against much poorer teams than Hearts have been this season. Alan, the let's get into a little bit about what you touched on before. James has given a good opening to it by talking about some of O'Neill's problems towards the end of that first 8-game stint, where we kind of ended up, how he stacks up against Rodgers. What do you think he's trying to do with this team? What do you think he is trying to... I mean, everybody will say he's trying to win football matches. Obviously, that's the case. But how is he going about it? How is he going about trying to get results out of players who have shown that they struggle to do it, depending on who it is that's telling them what to do?
Yeah, I'm left a bit disheartened as well because I don't understand where we're going with this team. Now, you could say, actually, to be a bit lighter for a second, that after we've railed about Celtic's dysfunctional midfield and how bad we are in build-up in midfield, that actually he's a genius because he solved that problem. Let's just eliminate the midfield. Let's just not have them involved in build-up.
Skip it altogether.
Let's just launch it forward. That falls down because we've then got 3 forwards who can't play with their backs to goal. So it all kind of falls down a little bit. But at least it falls down further up the pitch. You could argue that. Maeda was possibly the worst at it in terms of his lack of ability to take a ball in and just recycle with his back to goal. As I say, I think it's a bit unfair to Sean Chara, chucked into that game especially. But he lost about 12 or 13 duels, and maybe won one the whole game. And Yang is just sort of naive propensity to foul. And it's put Celtic into so much trouble so many times. And again, he's not one the ball's going to stick when it's fired at him from 50 yards in the air, funnily enough. So the midfield was never in it. Although I think, to be fair, Hearts had a player who was making his debut in central midfield, Mark Leonard, who seemed quite comfortable on the ball and seemed to be able to, you know, as much as anyone did, actually impose a little bit of control on the game. So fair play to him for that. And listen, they maybe thought, well, we're tired after that in the midweek. They're going to be obviously rested all week. They've not had a game. They've just been focusing purely on what they're going to do on this game. They're going to pour every ounce into this match, which they did, which is fair enough. Maybe we thought this was the best response, but again, coming back to the old Rodgers phrase of resting with the ball, I would have thought it would have been more sensible for Celtic to try and get hold of the ball. This is a squad built to play possession football. So try and exert some control. I mean, I don't think Hearts will win the league because they simply don't control games to any level at all. And I think that's going to be a real problem for them because there's just too much variance at play. There's too much, it's great if you can hoof the ball forward and then Trusty makes the mistake that he made, both for the Kizarides chance and for the sending off. It's great if that can happen for you, but it's not going to happen every game. It's not, and it's not going to, although it has been pretty much the season for them. At some point, that isn't going to happen for you, and at some point, you've got to just break teams down, and you've got to have a way of playing that means that all the forwards know what they're doing, getting into scoring positions rather than just hoping for a goal off a corner or a goal off a set piece. But Celtic is all about, as I keep saying, Celtic win leagues because they control the ball, they control the game, control the tempo, control possession, and therefore control the other team to a large extent and can dictate the tempo, dictate how much energy is being expended. They can rest with the ball. It allows them to play multiple games a week, etc. And when you just suddenly devolve into this chaos ball with a squad of players who've never played that way, and now one or two might Engels is probably more involved in games now than he used to be because this is the sort of football he was brought up with, and he actually fits the style of play quite well. But not many others do. We don't have a striker that, as I say, that can hold the ball up. We don't have forwards that are good with their back to goal.
This is terrible for McGregor, Al. This turns McGregor into I would argue a bad player, not a decline, a really good player in decline, but a objectively bad player.
He's been asked to be a little terrier on the beach chasing a plastic bag. That's what his role is now reduced to doing, which is great if you're a 2-year-old dog, but not great if you're a 33-year-old footballer, right? So yeah, absolutely, 100%. So I don't have an answer to this because it makes no sense to me, and it just increases the variance, and not in a good way because you're wrestling with a pig here, and we're playing at the pig's level on Sunday, to use a crude analogy, because they're good at this. Hearts are really good at playing this style of play. I mean, it's an incredible style of football. I don't know, younger listeners won't remember the Wimbledon team of the late 80s under Dave Bassett and people like that. I mean, if you find videos of it, watch it. It's incredible. They'll not remember maybe Stoke City under Tony Pulis, Sam Allardyce, Bolton Wanderers. This is a very deliberate style of play that is to reduce risk and maximize opportunity by getting the ball forward, so that. But then and if you don't care whether you win possession or not, you just try and hope that the opposition will make a mistake, or you win a duel like Kabori just wins a flick on, and suddenly Braga's right on top of the goalkeeper. I mean, that's not a pattern of play you've rehearsed on the training ground with zones marked out and players playing in the half spaces. It's just fucking random. It's just But that's and again, I'm not belittling it. That's a perfectly legitimate way to play. I just have my doubts it's a way to play that's going to win the league because there's too much variance and you're not controlling the game enough. Anyway, that's their problem to think about. Celtic's problem is we've almost, yes, the team had stagnated under Rodgers. Yes, that there was terrific problems in creation, but that's more to do with the quality in the final third. and the ill-fitting nature of the midfield we had. You fix those problems, we can go back to playing in a controlled way again. I don't think the answer is to try and play like Hearts play. That's just bonkers to me.
Yeah, the only worrying thing, if if Hearts don't look like winning the league and we don't look like winning the league, that leaves only one other option, especially when they're getting their usual sprinkling of penalties in there at the same time. Speaking of which, as far as controversial refereeing decisions go, James and Alan, I will get your thoughts on this. We obviously lost Auston Trusty. He was initially given a yellow card for a challenge on the Hearts striker. The amount of contact there you can argue over, but the VAR, who just so happened to be John Beaton, called the referee over. There was a review done and a red card was then awarded to Auston Trusty for what was deemed to be a challenge on, or denial of a goal scoring opportunity, what used to be called challenge on the last man back in my day. There's some discussion around it. I have seen a lot of Celtic supporters saying Scales was going to get round and cover. The Hearts player was heading away from goal. Plenty of reasons why not to give it. Hearts fans obviously given the opposite, saying he was quite clearly the last man. It was denial of a goal scoring opportunity. Where do you sit on it? Was the initial decision correct, or was the reviewed decision more what you thought was correct?
Yeah, I always couch this with a qualifier that I don't know the rules that well, so I always have to look at them again. Go to the IFAB website. What's that? The laws. I'm sorry. Yeah, you're right. Sorry. Sit there. Come on. So the laws of the game. So all I can say is my visceral response when it happened before he even pulled out his card was, "That's a straight red. We're in big trouble here." That was just my visceral response. So
I said the same. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think the broader conversation here about refereeing, I think we run a risk of devolving into, because if this league goes the way that I fear it's going, there's going to be a lot of excuse making that's going to happen. It's just normal. And I think that one of the important parts of Alan's Yorkshire Whistler endeavor that what do you want? Year 6 of that, Alan, or 5th year, or whatever it is?
5, yeah.
5, yeah. Is, Alan coined that term pattern of assistance, and he has an objective framework that identified it during a certain period of time, during a certain person running the officiating in Scotland. That same process is not suggesting that that's happening this season. It's more normal bad refereeing where the breaks are breaking and pissing everybody off, and everyone feels like they're getting cheated because the referees stink. So this game, I think, was a quintessential example of that, where you've got the Hearts people yelling about Scales kicking a guy in the box now getting called as a penalty, and Chvankara hitting a guy in the face, and that's not a penalty, and then Milne swings at a guy and hits him in the face, that's not, or not a penalty, a red card, not a red card, and this decision, which is the most prominent one with the Trusty sending off. So it's just, it's a mess. Ultimately, what I saw the game as is a permissive official who was trying to let a lot of stuff go, which, by the way, is kind of, generally the culture of refereeing in Scotland, where they let more go than a lot of other areas in European football, and that it was, inconsistent, which again is kind of normal. This is not some wild new thing that we endure with the Scottish referees with relative inconsistency. And if you look at the balance of the game, I don't know, where did it fall? I'm not going to go back and forensically look at every single call. It was just kind of a standard mess in this kind of game, which, by the way, is going to stress test all of this because both teams were playing shell ball, and it was nothing but a bunch of guys running around in chaos, running into each other. So, ultimately, the whole point that we talked about in the first part of the show was that is not positive for Celtic, and particularly against Hearts, who are really good on set pieces, giving them endless free kicks. to attack our box with is not a good thing. And whether there was a handful of those that were bad calls, probably, but there's always bad calls. That's kind of the reality of the situation.
Yeah, Alan, where do you stand on it? Because as James said, and I agreed, my initial response, and it's perhaps because you're, in my case anyway, it's perhaps because you're watching the two players chasing the ball and you're not totally aware of who's around and what other situations there are. But my initial response was that, at the very least, before the card came out, he's going to be very lucky to stay on the pitch here. And I was quite relieved when the yellow came out. Obviously, what subsequently happened. Where did you stand on it?
All right. Yeah, so on the listen, my answer to this is always in these instances is I'll ask an expert, right? So I'll ask the Yorkshire Whistler and get that view, and I might like it, I might not. You might like it, you might not. But at least it's coming from somebody who's verifiably objective and knows the laws of the game intimately and practices them on a professional level. So on that, but the thing that I suppose that exercised me most was more the overturning of the decision.
Right.
Because
That's
my honest feeling
question
about it was my understanding of the rules, the laws, sorry, on this and the guidance on this is that the decision that Stephen McLean came to was perfectly reasonable. If you look at that, and we'll have a look at that in a minute because I want to talk about the DOGSO thing in more detail because it doesn't happen very often. There haven't been many denial of a goal scoring opportunity, red cards, because they're really low volume events. They don't happen very often. So when they do come up and it impacts your team, you only might get one or two a season. This is why this ridiculousness that the community that Chris Boyd and Derek McInnes inhabit, going on about a number of games since Celtic had a red card, is complete fallacy in a sense because red cards in general are very low volume incidents. They don't happen very often. So going 86 games a red card in a league, especially for the top team, isn't particularly, I would have said, abnormal. I mean, there's been 18 red cards so far in the league this season. That means that some teams may not have had any. That's not particularly unusual. So anyway, if we actually have a look at the actual law itself, and somebody kindly showed me this diagram today, which I'd never seen before. The zona DOGSO, love it. The zona DOGSO, it's your dog. When you go for your DOGSOing, in that you're going in that zone there. Now I'm not entirely sure how they interpret this, but I know, but it's quite interesting that it carries the whole width of the penalty area. But then it narrows as it gets towards the goal. Now, this is interesting. So I'll come back to that in a minute. But if you look at this is the only guidance that there is, by the way, in the laws of the game, is that they must consider the distance between the offence and the goal. Now, in this case, he was about 35 to 40 yards from goal. Okay, the general direction of the play. Well, definitely, Kibori was attacking. The ball was in front of him. But the ball was basically going and in a direction diagonally towards the very edge of the penalty area, and I'll show you that in a second. So the ball's going quite distinctly away from the centre of the goal. The likelihood of keeping or gaining control of the ball, well, I would have said he would probably have got the ball. It was slowing up quite a lot, and again, I'll show you that in a picture in a moment. And location and number of defenders. You could argue maybe Scales or Murray might have got round, but I don't think that's clear. But I think just simply on the direction of the ball point, you could make a case for saying, well, he's being pushed very wide, therefore the probability of scoring from there is quite low. Now, I'm couching that in language that's natural to me because I understand expected goals. It's not something I expect Stephen McLean or Willie Collins, for that matter, never mind John Beaton, to particularly have any interest in or understanding of, sadly. So what I wanted to talk about really wasn't so much this incident, other than it as an example, because as I say, I'll ask an expert. But to me, if the guidance to officials is that any foul which is committed in that red zone there is automatically a red card, then by that letter of guidance, if that is the guidance, then it would be a red card. But I would argue that's a nonsense law, really. Not because of Trusty. Imagine it's your team. Because to me, if the way it looks like the play was developing, Gabori may have got possession of the football just outside the box, to the right of the little D, so quite wide of the goal. Now, if you take a shot from there, um, and then refer to an XG model about what's the probability of scoring from there, if you're outside the box, even if you have no defenders between you and the goal, your probability of scoring is only going to be somewhere around 4 to 8% at best, probability of scoring. Now, if you take the ball forward a yard and go into the box, so as that you're wide of the 6-yard box, but inside the box, the way that the ball was travelling, your probability of scoring does increase, and it goes up to something like between 10 and 15% at best. So what we're saying is that the situation that ends up with an attacker having a probability of scoring, which is verifiable, by the way, an AI engine attached to an XG model could work all this out quite quickly. A probability of scoring of somewhere between 4 and 13%. Denying that is worthy of a team losing a man. Now, to me, that doesn't sound right. And I'm not saying this because it's Trusty. I'm just saying, as a general principle of, a foul's being committed, what's the punishment? That just seems an incredibly harsh punishment in this case. And just to finish up on this particular one, to make the point here, I've just taken a snapshot, and I generally don't use stills for refereeing type calls, but I just wanted to emphasise that this is the straight line between Kabori and where the ball ends up. Now, this is the play went on. Scales obviously got back. I'm not suggesting that Scales, Trusty, and Murray would have got back. I'm not suggesting that at all. All I wanted to highlight with this was where the ball kind of ended up. Scales was obviously jogging by this point, as I say, and the ball was almost at a standstill. I think it would have actually Kabori would have got it somewhere just outside the box there. But that's really just to highlight the angle that the shot would likely have been taken from. And again, I don't want to go down the rabbit hole of this particular offence. I'll let the expert do that. But my point is more: is this what the lawmakers expect? That a team will lose a player because somebody ends up with a chance of scoring somewhere between 4 and 15%. I just think, from a football perspective, a principle perspective, that doesn't sound right to me. And furthermore, the even more egregious aspect, I think the worst thing about football, I will say, is the penalty kick, because you can get a 77-78% chance of scoring a goal from the most minor of offences. So, for example, the classic one would be an attacker running away from the goal on the edge of on the goal line to take the ball almost towards the corner flag, being harassed by a defender who clips his heels and he goes over. Penalty kick is given. And so
Right.
From the situation that the player has the ball, which is almost a 0 or 0.01% or less chance of scoring a goal, because of that foul, you're giving somebody a reward or a punishment for the defending team of 77% chance of scoring a goal. That's just bonkers. I don't know that there's any other sport that has a penalty as severe as a penalty kick in football. I'd love to hear in the comments if there are other sports that have more severe penalties for what are actually, from an XG perspective, trivial events. So I think those two areas are ripe for football to modernise and look at XG models and actually learn from them, learn about what they're telling them. This player was denied a goal-scoring opportunity. Yes, he was. But what kind of goal-scoring opportunity was it? It was a very low probability goal-scoring opportunity. Do we really want to, punish that with a sending off or a penalty or whatever? Question. And I just think the game could be improved if that was kind of, considered in refining the laws a bit more.
I'm going to jump in here, James, because you're going to be proud of me here. And I know people in the comments don't like it when you do a basketball analogy. But I do know enough about basketball to know, and you're probably going to tell me I'm wrong here. I think if a player is attempting a 3-point throw and they get fouled, they then get 3 free throws from the free throw line. Is that right?
Correct.
So to me, that would almost equate a penalty when you talk about the likelihood.
Not as severe, but yeah, because like your average free throw shooter is probably around 75%. And the average 3-point shooter is around, let's say 35%, 36%, something like that. So yeah, it's dumb to foul 3-point shooters generally.
Yeah.
Yeah, the one that popped into my mind, now that you've opened up this can of worms, and it's topical because there's been some direct incidents of this in the NFL playoffs, is the NFL still penalizes pass interference to the spot of the foul. So, for example, in the Denver Broncos Buffalo Bills game, the Broncos just chucked 2 high balls up long and got pass interference penalties that moved the ball way down the field, and just by definition, those are lower probability completions because the two players are battling for it. It's more likely to get dropped. I mean, there's just a lot of variables that go into it. So there's a school of thought that penalizing, let's say, a 50-yard penalty effectively, which moves them all the way down the field and makes it much easier to score, is disproportionate. College football only penalizes 15 yards. So if you anywhere on the field other than in the end zone, it's 15 yards, not the spot of the foul. So there's that kind of debate. So I think it's reasonable to have that view that it's a disproportionate penalty. The one thing that I wanted to bring up, and I'm going to bring Alan's visual up again here, is so I think we won't know now that as of our recording, they had just denied the appeal from Celtic. The SFA. So I think we won't really have a good understanding of the decision from VAR to intervene until we hear the audio. Because if there was something that McLean said that was objectively untrue in his relaying of what he saw to the VAR, i.e. covering defender or so this goes back to what the to use an old American joke with our former president, Bill Clinton, giving a deposition in a sexual harassment case, what the definition of is. It depends on how you defined is. So it depends on how you define direction of the ball. And as a matter of geometric definity, the ball was going closer to the goal in this line that Alan has drawn. It is closer at that point than it was when Kabori hit it, when Kabori fell down. That doesn't mean it was going directly at the goal. That's a different thing, right? So I think what Alan's, the DOGSO, if you think about this from a geometry perspective, and I hate to get into geometry, but once you pass the diagonals that go from the 6-yard box to the corner of the 18-yard box, the ball is then getting further away geometrically from the goal as it rolls. Whereas up until then, while it is not going central, it is still getting closer. Again, this is not really arguable. It's geometry. So when people were saying the ball was going away from the goal, that is geometrically wrong. It's not debatable. So,
here's my thing. My thing then, James. I'll put this to you as a kind of, I know there's no way to absolutely know, but let's assume the Hearts player stays on his feet, gets to the ball, and is beyond that diagonal line, but still inside the box. So he's on the right-hand side of the penalty box or inside it, and then Scales fills him coming across to cover. Does that mean he doesn't get sent off then?
That would be just a penalty.
Yeah.
That would just be a straight penalty then. And I don't think he would get a red card for that. I think that he might get a yellow for that. But yeah, no, so in theory, and I'm just totally putting this out as a possibility, if McLean says it's a yellow because the ball was going away from the goal, that is objectively false. It was not going away from the goal. It was not rolling directly at the goal, correct. But if the rule is, the law of the game is going towards the goal, and my understanding, what I read, last 36 hours or whatever, is that what they tried to delineate with the rule is what Alan said, stuff going actually away from the goal, meaning that, like the penalty situation that Alan references, a guy dribbling away from goal inside the penalty box, it's absurd that he gets a penalty for that. Well, this DOGSO role, it's to basically try to ensure that the direction of play is going towards the goal, not directly at the goal, towards the goal. And that's where you get into, I think that Zona DOGSO image speaks to the geometry of that and what actually towards means as opposed to directly at. So that would be a matter of objective error if McLean said, I gave it a yellow because it wasn't going towards goal.
So, but it's almost
Buying
as
that,
if
Alan?
so I don't. I'm not sure it's that prescriptive because I mean we don't know because we've never had this explained to us by a authoritative person. But
Exactly.
This reads to me as if the lawmakers have been so close to understanding this aspect of football, but just fell short. Which is that if the ball is going diagonally towards the goal, but at the same time to a more oblique angle relative to the goal, it's a much more difficult shooting opportunity, and therefore I think they're almost hinting at that if that is the case, then you're more likely to take a cautious view and maybe not issue a red card because again, at best that's going to be somewhere between 4 and 14% chance of scoring, which is not very high, even with no defenders in the way.
Yep.
Therefore, again, what would a reasonable person expect? If you asked a reasonable person, would you expect a red card to be given for denying somebody a 14% chance of scoring? If you ask a reasonable person that question, I think they'd probably think, no, that seems a bit harsh. And they seem like they're so close to getting to that point, and they have the technology,
Yep.
and they have the tools, the frameworks to do it. Have they got the will? My last point on the refereeing is I disagree with you about the fouls. I've been digging into this, and we'll go over this on extra time in detail. The level of penalisation of Celtic fouls is statistically nonsense compared to the rest of the league. And I think there's an interesting debate to be had about why that might be, because I think there could be some aggravating factors, and we can talk about those. But I believe the number of fouls that are awarded against Celtic, even this season compared to last season, is using statistical methods is beyond what one would expect through any sort of normal distribution.
And
I think
look forward to
living
that.
within West of Scotland society, I'm perfectly aware of what some of the aggravating factors might be, but it will be an interesting discussion nonetheless.
Well, and I'm sorry, just to wrap it up. So
Yeah.
on the officiating thing is I'm not suggesting what I laid out is what happened. I'm just giving it as a scenario where this could be something similar to the handball rule, which is just a moronic rule, as Alan has laid out, to turn that opportunity into a red card. Doesn't feel right because it kind of isn't, like it isn't when the guy's at the corner of the box towards the end line and he gets kicked in the shin or touched on the calf and he goes down. That's worth, effectively a full goal. I mean, that doesn't make any sense either. So there's a plausible scenario where I think this could be that scenario. We'll have to wait and see what the audio is if Big Willie does it on his monthly show, which I suspect he will, given how high profile it is.
Well, I was going to say about this show, the one thing that has taught me, that show, is that I have no opinion on handballs anymore because I do not understand it. I don't understand whether it's the natural position thing, whether it's are you too close to the ball, are you too far away from the ball, has it hit off you somewhere else first? Like, I don't actually envy a referee having to make a handball decision because how they understand what the rule is, I've no idea. And it seems to change from one video to the next. Speaking of which, Alan, I'm going to play devil's advocate here because, well, it's just fun and I like it. You said it seems a bit unfair to send somebody off for denial of a 10 to 15% goal scoring opportunity. Where would your threshold be for that then? Does it need to be above 50%? Where is that?
That's a fair question, Laura. Because actually, what people maybe who don't agonize and obsess about XG and stuff like we do, what people may not realize is there's not very many shots in football that are above 0.5, i.e. 50% probability of scoring. Very few. You'd almost have to be just outside the 6 yard box with only the goalkeeper to beat, with all the time in the world to pick your spot, or even having no players in front of you, not even a goalkeeper in front of you, are you then getting into that 50% and above category? Honestly, even there was some debate about some Hearts fans were showing. I think the Steinvender one was in the Scottish Cup semi-final last year when he got sent off. I think it was to Keskinen, maybe he was running through. Now that was different because the Keskinen had control of the ball. It wasn't a ball that was way out in front. With one difference, the other difference was that the direction of travel of Keskinen and the ball was directly from the middle of the pitch, directly towards the goal, and he got brought down about 45 yards from goal, and a red card was given. Now, if that challenge hadn't been made and Keskinen had been allowed to carry on running straight at the goal, so therefore he's basically got a one-on-one with the goalkeeper running at pace from a central position, you're still only talking about a 30 to 40% chance by most XG models. So I completely understand your point, Laura, but I think you probably have to set the threshold. And I think your thinking is exactly in tune with mine. I think you'd have to set the threshold round about that 30 to 40% mark, and anything above that is a red card. Maybe this is where you need the sin bin type thing, the orange card that the Yorkshire Worcester talks about. 10 minutes
penalty box, baby. Let's go
all
hockey.
I don't know.
Put them off for a minute.
Look at the American getting excited.
That's
about
Canadian. How dare you?
But the point here is what. So listen, I know that this is all going to come across as, as I say, we don't get many DOGSOs. It don't happen very often in the game. So it's quite. And the reason I'm mentioning all this is because I've never really thought about it before. So because I've had time to think about it, this is why I'm pontificating. My point is more about the general principle in football, not particularly the Trusty incident. It's about
proportionality.
Are the laws correct? Is this proportional to what? And I come back to what would a reasonable person expect?
It goes back to your
football, by the way.
Well, yeah, but it does go back to your comment about it is a shame that the referees maybe don't have an understanding of XG, because perhaps if they did, they could apply that rule with a little bit more consistency. But I guess then you would start getting arguments over people's interpretation of their perceived XG of the chance, and there always
it wouldn't solve anything.
Yeah.
But you kind of wouldn't, because you would have to be literally in the middle of the goal, bearing down on goal with only the goalkeeper to beat for it to be a significant XG chance. That's the point. It actually, anything that's remotely outside the width of the post, it's not going to qualify.
Yeah, and it's actually, when we interviewed David Sumpter, what was that, a little over a year ago now, Alan, already. He talked about some of the analytics that they've done at, I think it's called 12 Sport or whatever is their consulting company that they have, was, exactly when does it make sense to take a red? So it's a sliding scale. When there is a DOGSO, there's an amount of time in the game where statistically it's better to drag the guy down, because even then, man down, the probabilities, it works out. So all of these things can be reasonably modeled. I just, this goes back to evolution. So it was, Moneyball started 24 years ago now. And MLB just started with proactive rule changes 2 seasons ago, because the game had changed so much because of what had happened with big data and analytics, that it was changing the way the game was played to a degree where everyone was kind of pissed off about it and said, this sucks. Hello, Arsenal set pieces, right? So we're already starting to see the flowering of that in football, but we probably got a long way to go where you might end up with rule changes at some point, because things are so dramatically, different in how things are going, and people just say, this isn't all that enjoyable to watch anymore.
I think we're far enough away from people even accepting statistics as a concept in football that when you watch American sports in comparison, the way that they integrate it across all their sports is so different. So plus I don't particularly think our pundits are intelligent enough to pull up the numbers that some of the American guys do. It's crazy, but I'm now getting or getting nightmares, Alan, of VAR stopping to draw lines from the post out to see if the guy ran beyond the post
hexagon
before he get fouled. And oh my god, it's just going to get worse. It's going to get worse.
Getting the little XG book out and say, oh yeah, so in this quadrant on this what direction, wind,
Oh,
Yeah,
it's
that's what we need.
probably not.
That's what we need.
Probably not that far away from it, to be fair. And I went to see that film Mercy last night, where Chris Pratt gets judged by the AI judge that he created. And I'm not too sure that we're that far away from that. Just don't murder your wife. That's all you need to do, and then you're all good. But anyway, great film. Before we finish up, I guess, Alan, I'll come to you first. We've got Utrecht in the Europa League on Thursday. I mean, my temptation is to ask you, why are we still in the Europa League? Like, what's the point? Even if we get to any kind of knockout phase, we're going to come up against somebody who's going to give us a right hiding. But I guess I should keep it light and go, what are you hoping to see on Thursday against them?
Well, a win. I mean, maybe this kind of hoofball is going to set us up nicely for a Europa League run. Maybe being an underdog and playing like Hearts do is actually the way forward for Celtic in the Europa League. I mean, I've railed for years about how kind of lacking in guile we are, and in European matches, and not focusing enough on the dark arts, to get through these games. Hoping for a win. I mean, Celtic are poor in the Europa League, has to be said. But Utrecht are already out. They're a mid-table Dutch team by any metric, and they are not particularly impressive.
They sound primed to beat us, actually.
Well, if you look at their fixtures, they've actually had a really tough draw, and they've played Spanish teams, English teams, German teams, French teams, and lost to them, and only by one goal generally. And then I think the last game they lost 2-0 at home to Genk, and that was it. Kind of over. They held Porto to a draw at home. So they've had a really tough, much tougher set of fixtures than Celtic has. But they are already out, and they are actually much closer to the relegation zone in Holland than they are to... they're kind of mid-between. I think down to 8th in Holland has a chance of European football, but they're kind of a few points behind that, but they're not that far off the bottom three either. So they may well have checked out as far as the Europa League is concerned. We can only hope for that. They're a pretty mediocre side. Nothing particularly stands out other than a couple of things, is that in Holland, no other team completes more crosses into the box than them. Have we heard this before? That's slightly worrying. They do like a cross, and they are quite good at it. But other than that, nothing amazing about them. I think James has probably looked at them a bit closer than I have, so I'll let him have a go.
James, the only thing I know about Utrecht from my Dutch sister-in-law is that it's a nice city to go and be a student in. It's a nice university town. Apart from that, I know nothing about the football team, so educate me.
Well, worlds collided in one of their earlier, I forget which fixture it was, but I echo what Alan said. They've had a rough strength of schedule, as they say, in their league phase. And it might have been Freiburg, but our good friend Vilisis Barkas is generally their starting keeper. And he was sent off in that game by one Jonathan Beaton.
Is that so he doesn't have to play against us? Is he?
No, he already served it. He already served it. It was back in, I think, October or November. But it was basically one of these situations where the opposition scored a goal and the guy ran in to grab the ball, and it became a bit of a tussle. And then Barkas kind of got up in his face and maybe grazed him, and the guy went down like he got headbutted, and Beaton went straight to the red card.
Was it between the posts, though?
Yes. So yeah, that's the relatable angle. I would say, I'll echo Alan. They're kind of just a run-of-the-mill team. They play kind of generally 4-2-3-1, 4-3-3. I will say they have some really entertaining, nice attacking players. They have Caroline, I forget his name, but number 10, their left winger. If he plays, like again, this comes back down to it. What are they going to prioritize? This game really doesn't mean anything to them. So if they give us their A team, I would be a lot more concerned because there's a lot of attacking talent there. And I would say athleticism, they're not really big and physical. It'd be interesting if we went more direct against them. They're also not like a real big pressing team either. They're more of a mid-block, almost like what we saw with Hearts to a degree. So I could see them come up with a game plan that's, Heart-esque based off of what Hearts did on the weekend. That wouldn't be shocking. So it's not a game that I would take lightly just because of where we're at. I mean, this is where we're at. I mean, if Utrecht puts out their first team, that's kind of, mid-table Belgium, Netherlands. That's where we're at, unfortunately. would make me, even at home, not all that confident. But it's not a team we should be fearing. Like they give up chances. There's plenty of opportunities in transition, that kind of thing. But they have some guys that can really create and are really dynamic. So I think if they play, it'll be an entertaining game. But there again, it comes back to how will we set up? How will we play? Who's available? Is Tierney out? Who plays left back then? The striker situation's still what it is. Kenny's out now. So is it Maeda, Taneki, and Yang up front? I mean, are we going long to Maeda at striker? I mean, what are we doing here? But anyway, so yeah, no, it should be very comfortable, but anxious regardless.
Pending the weather, I will be there in person, so I will report back on my findings. I'm just disappointed there, James. You didn't. You passed up the opportunity to call them a run of the windmill team, but I do.
I'm not clever enough to get that one, man. That should have been an obvious one. But
I'm not the dad here. That's supposed to be your forte.
My domain, anyway. Dad jokes. You're right.
But anyway, Alan, before we wrap up, what can people expect if they join us on the huddlebreakdown.com in terms of what's available there?
Yeah, so I'm hoping that James is going to be rushed off his feet doing a slew of benchmarking before the end of the transfer window. All these new signings.
Not if you listen to Martin.
All 4 signings. Come on, baby.
Yeah. They got that to look out for. So yeah, there'll be if we get anything. Well, I'm even saying this. If anything happens before the end of the window, we may even jump on a live podcast just to celebrate the fact.
Just to clarify, there will be no live podcast.
There will not be a live podcast. Other than that, I think Thursdays we've not actually talked about it yet, but we may do a kind of post-match thing on the Utrecht game because obviously we tend to record around about when that game is on. So we may do something on there. As I want to do a little bit more digging on some of the refereeing stuff because although I agree with James that patterns of assistance very much have kind of dissolved into just normal chaos, this issue that is been bubbling along for quite some time now and many fans' minds about foul rates I think is very interesting. So we'll have a dive into that on the next Extra Time show. So got that to look forward to as well. Anything else, James? What have I forgotten?
No, just I did a piece on Nygren still the fracturing of the perception on poor Nygren is fascinating.
Try and get people to sign up, James. Come on.
Well, you can come read about how his attacking output is better than Matt O'Reilly's was in his best season at Celtic so far. So
well saved. That is.
I'm not suggesting that he's a better player because I don't think he is. But the discourse surrounding him that he's like not a productive player or he was a bad signing or any of that kind of stuff, I think it's just completely off the rails. We'd be in big trouble if we didn't have him this season. Is kind of the point of the analysis. So.
I'm sure you've got more on it than me just writing 4 words saying David Turnbull gives me Paul McStay vibes or something like that. which is what I would do. Alan, you looked
So
like you were going to say something.
sorry, there was one thing I forgot. Yeah, sorry, there was one thing I forgot, which is so the Speedboat League, which I hopefully is popular, which kind of models out the expected points and then tries to look ahead to the seasons to estimate where teams will finish. Massive expansion, right? So I've had real fun with this because we spend a lot of time on this show talking about variance, and actually, some of it gets to the heart of what football actually is, and I'm definitely talking out my arse now, but but in terms of it's so important in football, and so I've been thinking about ways to illustrate the impact of things like controllable and uncontrollable variance that James talks about, impacts of things like red cards, own goals, penalties. What difference does it make over a season? So I've come up with a bit of a framework for showing that. So what I'm probably going to do this week is put all those into quite a long form piece that I'll make available for everybody. And then, hopefully if you like this stuff and you like to see almost a different view of the league, then it'll entice you to sign up and get some more on an ongoing basis.
Well, there you go. For me springing it on you and you not having very much to say, you've managed to bring about a few things that people can look forward to on the huddlebreakdown.com. If you can support us there, that would be great. Or even just pop down to the button below what you're seeing here. Click subscribe. You'll get or go live on YouTube, and then you've got the Thursday show that you can get through the Substack at huddlebreakdown.com. James and Alan, thank you very much for joining me. Here's hoping for a positive result on Thursday, and we will see everybody next week.